You think I don't know what a silent override looks like, Marlene? She blinked, slow and smug. Her hand still rested near the clipboard like it gave her jurisdiction. I'm sorry, Daniel, but you left your override status active in the HOA backend. We have protocols for safety checks, especially when there's a child involved. That grid was deactivated 3 years ago, I said, voice flat. And the fob you used still pings back to a decommissioned server I personally flagged for privacy violations. You reactivated my unit manually, without consent. She paused for half a breath. I had reason to believe the child was unsupervised. My daughter was in the bath. Silence. Let me introduce myself. Name's Daniel Rourke, former Army technician, now a freelance residential security consultant with a specialty in surveillance loopholes, mainly because I've designed, broken, or rebuilt most of them. The house? Inherited from my parents. After my wife died, it was the one place Lily and I could start over without looking over our shoulders. So when someone opens the back door to that house uninvited, when my daughter is naked and vulnerable upstairs, I don't give warnings. I log timestamps, I encrypt footage, and I remember everything. You need to understand something about Windmere Hills. It's the kind of neighborhood where the hedges are symmetrical, the porch lights flicker in unison, and people like Marlene Vexler run the world with a laminated binder and a permanent frown. She's the HOA vice president, retired city planner, widow of a local politician, smiles like a queen, walks like a judge, and talks like your mother-in-law with a private investigator on speed dial. The first citation I got from her was about the non-regulation mulch in my flower beds. The second was for leaving the garbage can out past 10 a.m. by, get this, 7 minutes. But I took it all. Quietly, I wanted peace. I thought I could keep Lily sheltered from the static, keep the walls clean. But there's no such thing as peace with people like Marlene, not if you ignore them long enough. Saturday morning was warm, quiet. Lily was upstairs with her bath crayons and a Bluetooth speaker playing a fantasy audiobook. I was downstairs on a call with a client when the system pinged, unauthorized back entry. Override flag detected. I checked the live feed and my stomach dropped. There she was, Marlene Vexler, key fob in hand, calm as a housekeeper. She opened the door, didn't knock, didn't call, just walked in. She stepped inside like she'd done it before, looked around my living room, peered into the kitchen, glanced slowly toward the staircase, then left. Door opened behind her, no urgency, no shame. I ran upstairs first. Lily was fine, hair covered in bubbles, narrating a dragon scene with her foam sword. That moment? That was the anchor. That's when everything in me locked into place. This wasn't about HOA rules. This wasn't about fines. This was my daughter's home. And someone just opened the damn door like she had a right to. I didn't call the HOA. I called Detective Alicia Tran. We served together once, back when servers had dials and cybercrime meant hunting rogue USBs. Now she works cyber investigations for the county precinct. She picked up on the first ring. I didn't need to explain everything. I just said, she used an override. House was flagged dormant. Child was inside. A beat of silence, then, I'm on my way. But I wasn't ready to go loud, not yet. First, I needed the system logs, handshake packets, IP traces, audit flags. Then I downloaded the footage, not just the clip, the whole stream from motion trigger to exit point, encrypted twice, backed up to a drive stored off-site. Then I did something petty. I turned on the porch light. It flickered once, hen twice. The HOA hates when bulbs aren't uniform. Good, let it flicker. Where are you watching from? Front porch, apartment couch, military base halfway around the world? Because wherever you are, if you've ever dealt with someone like Marlene, someone who thinks your silence is submission, then keep watching. She opened the wrong door. Now I'm making sure no one ever does again. The porch light flickered once, just enough to draw attention, just enough to make a certain someone squint from across the street. I left it on. Because if Marlene wanted to play subtle war, I'd respond in kind. No drama, no raised voices, just quiet resistance, documented with timestamps and a smile. That's how it all started, really, with the mulch. Not drugs, not violence, just a bag of decorative bark that, apparently, didn't meet Windmere Hills' aesthetic uniformity standards. I remember standing there with the citation in one hand and a cup of coffee in the other, trying to understand how brown wood chips were threatening the moral fabric of the neighborhood. I didn't argue. I replaced it with approved cedar blend, That was my first lesson. Don't poke the bear, especially when the bear has a clipboard and a neighborhood-wide radio network. But I did start saving things. Pictures of the porch, timestamps from the camera, digital backups of every warning letter, just in case. The second citation? Visible porch clutter. That was Lily's watering can and a broken wind chime we hadn't gotten around to fixing. Third? Flagrant trash bin exposure. I'd left it out at 10:08 a.m. on a Monday, 8 minutes past collection time. Apparently, my house was single-handedly destroying Winmere's morning charm. Your house is becoming a visual liability, Marlene had told me once, without blinking. I just nodded and made a note in my log. To be fair, not all the board members were like her. Some were decent, or at least disinterested. But Marlene didn't just enforce rules. She created them, and people followed because no one wanted to be the next target. Easier to say nothing than to challenge the queen of compliance. What Marlene never counted on, though, was that I'd been trained to see patterns, quiet ones, the kind that unfold over time like chess plays. Each citation, each unannounced drive-by, wasn't just random harassment, it was data. And that's what I started building, a private database of HOA surveillance behavior. Of course, Marlene thought she had the upper hand because she believed in the myth most HOA officers do, that homeowners are either helpless or too proud to fight back. She didn't know I'd worked on security architecture for field ops, or that I'd taken apart and rewritten firmware on systems 3 times more sophisticated than Winmere's access grid. Winmere Hills, like many planned neighborhoods, had installed smart access overrides for emergencies, a system designed to let HOA-authorized responders access homes in the case of fires, gas leaks, medical calls, but it was flawed. It didn't allow for true opt-outs, and the few who tried got stonewalled under the guise of community risk. I filed the opt-out 3 years ago after I rewired my home's security system. 2 letters, certified, signed by the previous HOA president, Greg Summers. I thought that was the end of it. Until Saturday morning proved otherwise. Because when I checked the audit trail after Marlene stepped into my home, I found something disturbing. My address was still active in the override grid, not publicly, just under a hidden flag, dormant, low priority, and tucked beneath a string of emergency permissions I never signed off on. And the override key she used? It pinged the HOA server with a valid reactivation request. The origin IP? Marlene's device, logged in under someone else's access ID. She'd found a loophole, a quiet, forgotten treacherous door left open in a system no one ever checks because they trust the people with the keys, and she'd walked right through it. I sat there that night, staring at the printed notices she'd left over the years. They looked harmless on their own, cheery fonts, Winmere logos, little exclamation points about community standards. But lined up on the table, they told a different story. One of a woman who didn't like being ignored, one who thought control was the same thing as safety, and one who didn't realize that I wasn't the kind of man who'd let his daughter be a line item on someone's compliance report. I turned the porch light off, finally, but I left the camera rolling. I had a feeling Marlene wasn't done yet. The chairs were arranged in a semicircle like always, folding metal, just uncomfortable enough to keep the meeting short. I hadn't been to a Winmere board session in over a year, but tonight I sat dead center, not in the back, not on the side. Middle of the room, arms crossed, flash drive in my pocket. Marlene noticed the second I walked in. She wore that same pastel cardigan she always did when she was pretending to be approachable. Floral pin at the collar, hair pulled tight, clipboard in hand like always, the HOA's scepter of righteousness. "Mr. Rourke," she said, too sweet, too loud. "It's been a while." I nodded once. Didn't want to be here. Figured I should be. She offered a thin smile. "Glad you finally care about the community." There was a man sitting 2 seats to her right, mid-50s, gray slacks, white button-down with a permanent wrinkle down the middle. Brian Keller, board treasurer, the kind of man who reads every warranty before buying a toaster. He avoided my eyes, just stared down at the tablet in his lap. Greg Summers, the HOA president, cleared his throat. "All right, let's begin." They started with lawn regulations, dead grass patches, sprinkler misuse, a debate about whether solar garden lights count as permanent fixtures. I sat through all of it, silent, letting Marlene have her rhythm, letting her feel in control. And then, next, item 7, complaint of override misuse. She stiffened but didn't break stride. Yes, we've received an accusation involving HOA-issued access tools being used improperly. I've reviewed the system. No anomalies were reported. In fact, this seems to stem from a homeowner misunderstanding emergency protocol. I have the logs, I said. Marlene's mouth closed mid-sentence. Greg turned to me. Mr. Rourke, if you've brought documentation, you're welcome to present it. I stood slowly, pulled the flash drive from my pocket, plugged it into the board's projection laptop. Older model, too slow, still running an outdated Windows build. While it loaded, I didn't look at the screen. I looked at Marlene. The override system was supposed to be permanently deactivated for my unit, I said. 3 years ago, signed off by Greg himself. I have the paperwork at home if anyone wants to cross-check it. Greg frowned but didn't speak. I clicked once. The screen lit up with a table, clean, color-coded, time-stamped. Each column detailed access attempts, override flags, origin IP, authorization signature. Saturday morning, I said, pointing at the log. 9:06 a.m., unauthorized backdoor access. Origin IP traced to a device registered under this HOA's admin pool. Override key issued, entry recorded, no emergency declared. Marlene sat still, blinking just a little slower than usual. That's not proof of misuse. It's proof of unauthorized access to my home, while my daughter was alone upstairs. Brian's hand twitched. The pen in his grip slipped, hit the floor with a sharp metallic ping. Everyone turned. He ducked under his chair to pick it up. Greg finally spoke. We should conduct an internal audit. No need, I said, clicking again. Here's the admin tag tied to the override request. ID B. Keller 03, Brian's. Bria. And froze, half bent forward, pen still in his fingers. I'm not accusing you, Brian, I added quieter. Not yet. I'm just asking why your access key authorized a backdoor override on a unit you knew was opted out. He straightened slowly, face pale. It could be a default rollover. Sometimes older admin tags get pulled into permissions without our knowledge. Marlene jumped in. Exactly. It's most likely a server-side artifact. These systems are old. Daniel's just misunderstanding how override inheritance works. I turned to her calm. You think I don't understand inheritance? She blinked. But I wasn't looking at her anymore. I was watching Brian. He wouldn't meet my eyes. His fingers tapped against the folder in his lap. Once, twice, rhythmless. I'm not looking for drama, I said. I'm just trying to understand how a dormant unit got manually flagged as active, and why the board's access tools were used on a private residence without any declared cause. No one answered. Marlene stared at the screen like she could melt it with her eyes. Brian kept tapping. Greg rubbed his temple. I sat down, didn't unplug the drive, just left it there, blinking, waiting. Behind me, someone cleared their throat nervously. The meeting moved on. No vote, no ruling, just silence. But I didn't need them to say anything. I'd seen what I came to see. I didn't unplug the flash drive when I left the meeting. I wanted it to sit there, blinking, undeniable, long after I'd walked out. A little ghost of truth, embedded right into their borrowed laptop. Let them wonder if it was still recording. Let Marlene sweat. Back home, Lily was already asleep. Her audiobook had looped twice, and she'd curled up with her stuffed dragon like the world was still safe. I stood in the doorway for a minute longer than usual, just watching her breathe, and then I went downstairs to finish what I'd started. I powered up the terminal in the study, my private board. LD, not networked to anything HOA adjacent. Logged in, entered my credentials, and brought up the archival grid. Windmere Hill's override system had once been a security selling point, pitch perfect in brochures designed for crisis response access, but it had aged badly and nobody wanted to spend the money to upgrade. The server backend was a Frankenstein of patches and legacy tags. 3 years ago, I'd opted out, fully. I remembered submitting it twice, once by email, once in person, signed by Greg Summers himself. The system should have marked my property as excluded, blacklisted from all future override assignments. But as I drilled down into the logs, one thing jumped out. Emergency override, Rourke unit, status, dormant, flag, date, 1,125 days ago, last access, active. Sat 09:06 a.m., admin auth, B. Keller 03. I stared at it for a long moment. Dormant didn't mean deleted. Dormant meant hidden, archived under a security protocol most people wouldn't know how to access. But I'd written my own code years ago to search legacy flags. That's why I could see it. It was still there, still live, and it had been used. I navigated into the handshake metadata, micro logs of every override key that connected to my property. There it was. A clean handshake at Euro 906. Origin point matched Marlene's device ID, but the authorization came through Brian's login. I leaned back, not shocked, just disappointed. Because this wasn't a system glitch. This was someone digging into a dead grid and reawakening it. Someone with enough knowledge or arrogance to think no one would ever check. A dormant flag like this had to be manually reauthorized. That meant someone had logged into the HOA's override manager, searched for inactive entries, and toggled mine back to green. Why? Because I'd been quiet. Too quiet. Because Marlene had pushed me with fake mulch violations and dogwood pruning and I hadn't pushed back. I hadn't fought the fines. I'd made payments, fixed things, smiled, stayed off her radar. She thought I was passive. She thought the system would cover her tracks. I clicked deeper into the log structure. No one else on the override list had similar dormant flags reactivated. No other homes had admin reentry within the past 6 months. It was just me. My house, my name, my daughter upstairs. This wasn't about some protocol oversight. It was targeted. I ran a full trace of the key fob used. It registered a unique hash, something I recognized from an older batch Windmere issued 6 years ago. Fewer than 10 were still active. I'd seen that batch when I helped the board audit their door scanner system back in my first year here. Only 4 of those fobs had full override permission, and only 1 belonged to Marlene. I exhaled slowly. The evidence was airtight. The logs, the digital fingerprint, the backdoor access attempt, the dormant reactivation, all of it pointed to one thing. She'd never let go of my house. Even when I'd disconnected. Even when I'd followed the rules. She'd just waited. Waited for a moment to step back in like it still belonged to her. I shut down the system, pulled the printed override log and placed it into my binder, right between the mulch citation and the garbage bin photo. And then I walked to the breaker panel and flipped the porch light back on. It blinked. Once. Twice. Still crooked. Still mine. The porch light was still flickering when I went back inside. I could have fixed it, tightened the bulb, reset the connection, but something about the irregular blink felt right, like the house itself was twitching, trying to shake something off. I locked up and turned toward the basement. There's a difference between digging for information and digging for proof. Proof is what you show a lawyer. Information is what you feel in your gut. I needed both. The basement light hadn't been used in weeks. The switch clicked, but nothing happened. I grabbed it on. Had the flashlight from the kitchen drawer and started down anyway. My boots hit the concrete with a muted thud, familiar creak near the 3rd step. Always there. Always meant you weren't alone. The air was sharp with dust and old paint. Not mold exactly, just age. I moved past the stacked boxes of seasonal junk, the unused camping gear, and the old desk chair Lily once declared her rocket seat. Toward the back, beneath the insulation rolls and 2 cracked file cabinets, was a dented blue storage bin I hadn't touched in over a decade. I pulled it out. Metal corners scraped concrete. The flashlight caught flakes of rust. Inside were old HOA pamphlets, welcome packets, neighborhood maps, the kind of paper people throw out after move-in day. I kept them. My parents had too. My dad had always believed in record keeping. People lie, paper doesn't. I lifted out a stack of manila folders, thumbed through landscape guidelines, bylaws, renovation request forms, all the lovely paperwork Marlene used like a weapon. Near the bottom was a thinner folder, creased, water-stained, half-forgotten, labeled in my father's handwriting, Windmere Access Memos. I flipped it open, and there it was, a printed override grid dated 10 years back. Original system schema, pre-digital, each line marked with address, override status, assigned access key holder, hand-initialed at the bottom corner in blue ink, MV Marlene Vexler. My address was listed with a P next to it. Permanent access due to medical exemption. No one in this house had ever filed one. Not even close. The motion sensor above me clicked. Light burst on. It made me flinch. I'd forgotten the sensor still worked. The sudden glow hit the wall behind me, and there, pinned to the insulation with a rusted tack, was another sheet I didn't remember ever seeing. A notice. Windmere Hills HOA Emergency Preparedness Memo dated 2013 outlined emergency override protocol, suggested permanent override permissions for vulnerable households, citing children, elderly, and disabled residents. Recommendation notes added at the bottom, written in red pen. Use discretion. Certain units may require unnotified check-ins if homeowner is non-compliant. Unnotified check-ins. She'd been laying the foundation for this for a decade, writing policies that blurred boundaries just enough, wrapping control in the language of safety, making sure her hands never appeared directly on the doorknob. Except now they had. I scanned the memo again. There were no signatures, just initials, but the tone, the penmanship, even the phrasing, it all matched the citation letters she hand-delivered. I could hear her voice in that line. Use discretion. She always liked discretion. The edges of the memo curled slightly when I lifted it. Cheap stock, yellowed from years of cold and heat, but it would scan just fine. And with the original override grid from the same box, I had both the policy and the mechanism. The flashlight battery started to dim. The beam pulsed once, then again, casting my shadow long across the floor. I looked around the basement, the paint-stained concrete, the warped shelving, the water heater with its slow hiss. This was supposed to be the safest corner of the house, foundation level, below everything, untouchable. But she'd reached down here too, in a way, left her print on the policies that bled into every wall, every outlet, every quietly blinking light. I folded the memo, tucked it into the folder with the grid, and closed the bin. As I climbed the stairs, the wood flexed beneath my steps, groaning just enough to remind me some things push back when stepped on, and I wasn't stepping lightly anymore. The folder felt heavier than it should have. It wasn't even a full inch thick, but paper carries weight wet, and the truth is printed on it. The next board meeting was held inside the Windmere Clubhouse this time, a staged shift after the last gathering got too technical for the outdoor pavilion, as Greg put it. More like they didn't want neighbors overhearing things they couldn't spin. I arrived 5 minutes early and didn't say a word, just walked in, sat down front and center again, same spot. Marlene was already there, sorting papers, glasses on the tip of her nose, pretending not to notice me. Brian sat to her left, not pretending anything. He looked pale, fingers tapping the edge of a manila envelope. Greg cleared his throat to start. We'll begin with the emergency business brought up last session regarding override grid misuse and related access protocols. Marlene spoke before anyone else could. After consulting with legal, it appears the system in question has known legacy faults. Several inactive override tags were accidentally reactivated during a server migration. We deeply regret the confusion, but it was an administrative artifact, not malice, not misuse. She folded her hands, nodded like a kindergarten teacher addressing rowdy kids. And I'd like to clarify, I entered Mr. Rourke's property only because I had genuine concern. His daughter has been seen alone during weekdays. He's often isolated. It was, in my view, a justified welfare check. There it was, the bait. And I let her say it, let her think she was back in control. I stood up calmly, pulled a single sheet from my folder and handed it to Greg, who blinked as he read the header. Windmere Hills HOA Override Protocol, dated 2013, signed by Marlene Vexler. Greg, I said, voice steady, you signed my opt-out form personally. That means my property should have been completely excluded from emergency override access for the last 3 years. But someone reactivated my dormant flag 2 weeks ago, and that override was used to open my back door. I turned to Marlene, finally meeting her eyes. My daughter was in the bath. Silence hit the room like a dropped brick. Marlene's jaw shifted. I told you it was concern. No, I said louder now. That wasn't concern. You opened my door without a warrant, without consent, without cause. That's not concern, Marlene. That's a felony. Greg froze, half in a breath. Brian coughed. Sharp, dry. His pen rolled off the table and clattered to the floor. He didn't move to pick it up this time. Marlene narrowed her eyes. I have discretionary authority as a board officer. Not anymore, you don't. I pulled out the second document, the printed override grid from the basement, complete with her handwriting and personal notes about unnotified check-ins for non-compliant households. I passed it to Greg. Take a look at the note at the bottom. Recognize the initials? Greg read it and looked sick. I've got footage, I said, turning to the room. Audit logs, access timestamps, admin key hashes. You all saw the basic logs last week, but this is the origin. This is where the override got approved, not by the system, not by error, By her. Brian's voice came out quieter than I expected. She used my credentials. I didn't know she used it. Heads turned. Marlene whipped her neck toward him. You told me it was cleared. I thought it was hypothetical, Brian snapped. You said it was precautionary. You didn't say you'd actually gone inside. Greg stood slowly, pressing his palms into the table. We'll need a private board review. No, I said. You don't get to fix this behind closed doors. She walked into my home. She violated my daughter's privacy. This isn't a committee issue anymore. It's a legal one. I turned to the rest of the members. You think this is just about HOA procedures? Override tags? It's not. This is about control. She used it, and now she's going to answer for it. The room stayed quiet, not in confusion, in realization. A silence that comes when the illusion finally breaks, and no one rushes to defend the one who shattered it. He knocked once, barely audible, and paused like he might bolt if the door even creaked. Lily was already asleep upstairs. I'd been reading on the couch, lights dim, TV silent. I knew it was him before I opened the door. Brian Keller. His tie was gone, collar limp, eyes bloodshot like he hadn't slept since the board meeting. He held a folded stack of papers in one hand, creased at the edges, like he'd crushed it too tightly before deciding to bring it. Can we talk? He asked, voice low. I stepped aside, said nothing, gestured toward the dining table. He sat like the chair might bite him. I put the kettle on, 2 mugs down, one for him, one for me. Only mine ended up touched. He stared at the empty cup like it might explain something. I didn't know she went inside, he said finally. Not really. I mean, I knew she talked about it, said we needed a way to keep tabs on properties that weren't fully compliant. He looked up at me. I didn't think she meant literal entry. I didn't answer, just waited, let the silence keep pressing. She used my admin tag, he went on. Said hers had expired due to the override rollback and that she needed a backup while the board resynced the grid. I didn't log in myself, but I signed the credentials waiver 6 weeks ago. Figured it was harmless. I raised an eyebrow. You ever sign off on her walking into a house with a child in it? He winced. No. The kettle whined. I poured the water into my mug. His remained untouched, steam rising between us. He unfolded the crumpled stack and pushed it toward me. Printed these earlier. Thought you'd need them. The top email was from Marlene. Header read, subject, temporary override, credential use. B. Keller. To self, CC, Brian Keller. Brian, per our conversation, I'll be temporarily authorizing admin-level access on your behalf. That, as will only be used for non-intrusive wellness verifications, primarily involving properties with known compliance irregularities. Please flag this under board emergency prep. I flipped the page. Second email. Same thread. 2 weeks later. Follow-up. Initiating one-off override for unit number 47. Rourke. Minimal visibility. Will notify if escalation needed. M. I leaned back in my chair. No apology in her tone. No hesitation. Just policy dressed up like concern. Minimal visibility, like that made it cleaner. Like stepping into my living room without consent could be categorized as anything less than a violation. You didn't write her back, I said, thumbing the timestamp. Brian shook his head. Didn't know she'd used it until after the first meeting. I thought, if I stayed quiet, this would all get buried. It's not buried. He looked at me, hands clasped together so tightly his knuckles went pale. I'm not built for this, Daniel. I crunch numbers, file reports. I joined the board to help keep dues down, not to cover someone's power trip. And yet, here you are. He winced again. I stood, walked to the living room, grabbed the binder from the shelf, flipped it open to the growing section marked Override Access, Incident Chain, and slid the emails in. This breaks it, I said. The intent, the cover, her timeline. Once Tran sees this, it's actionable. Brian's voice cracked. Do I get named? I looked him over. You get credit, not blame. You show up now, off the record, and confirm what I already have. You're a whistleblower. Stay silent, though, and you're a co-conspirator. He nodded, slow. Not like he agreed, like he finally understood the cost. You think they'll turn on her? He asked. They already have. They're just waiting for someone else to say it first. I walked him to the door. He stepped outside into the dark, like the porch might collapse under his guilt. I watched him disappear down the sidewalk, his shoulders hunched, his pace fast, his head low. Back inside, his tea still sat untouched on the table. Steam gone, mug full. I left it there. Some two. Ruths don't need ceremony. The tea mug was still sitting on the table the next morning, cold, untouched, like Brian had left a piece of his guilt behind. I poured it down the sink. I didn't need his remorse. What I needed now was resolution. I booted up my system and started the packaging process, one folder at a time. The video footage, network handshake logs, override metadata, grid reactivation timestamps, server-side reuse markers, Brian's email chain. Every file was scrubbed, timestamped, sorted, and sealed. I encrypted it all onto a blank USB drive, military-grade hash lock, no cloud sync. Labeled it Windmere Penetration 01, the kind of name you use when you want a prosecutor to lean forward in their chair. I sent Tran a text. Daniel, package ready? Physical drop? Tran, swing by, I've got gloves and a scanner. No chain of custody jokes. Daniel, not even one? Tran, fine, one. Bring coffee. She still worked out of a satellite field office behind a failing DMV, wedged between a payday loan sign and a shuttered vape shop. Same crooked blinds, same desk with the corner gouge. She didn't ask me to explain anything, just took the USB, slid it into an air-gapped terminal, and started running silent scans. 10 minutes later, she looked up. This is clean, it's airtight. You just made someone's week in the DA's office. I nodded. She thinks she's untouchable. She's not anymore. She held up the USB. Once this leaves my desk, I can't stall it. You ready for this to go full? Yeah. Just need one more thing before you file. She raised an eyebrow. A trap. Tran sat back in her chair. You want a warrant sting? No, nothing formal, not yet. Just a perimeter tripwire. She's not done. She's the kind who wants to clean her mess before it stains her resume. I handed her a printed floor plan of my home's digital security setup. I rewired my back panel last night, installed a silent trigger point. If that override fob even gets within handshake distance again, it'll ping two systems, one in-house, one that texts me. And if that happens, I want a real-time trace sent to your side. She looked impressed. Passive surveillance, legal jurisdiction intact, clean escalation protocol. You sure you're not the one who should have stayed in government? I've got a better job, I said. I protect people who don't even know they need protecting. She tapped the USB once against the desk. All right, I'll wait 48 hours before pushing this to the DA. You get your trap. But if she triggers it, she won't get a second chance. Back home, I pulled the system control panel from the closet, took off the casing, rewired the board, and soldered the silent alert circuit into the sublayer. No beeps, no lights, no sounds, just a whisper into the grid the second someone tried to make my house their business again. I taped a small sticker to the inside of the casing, one Lily would never see. If you're reading this, you've already failed. The paper trail binder was now 4 inches thick, every citation, every photo, every motion alert. I scanned a few pages into a presentation format, clean layout, highlighted access violations, annotations in red. I wasn't just building a case anymore, I was preparing an exhibit. I printed one hard copy, slid it into a black presentation folder. Label, Windmere Incident, closure package, subtext, for distribution. Pending final trigger, I placed it on the table beneath the flickering porch light, let it sit in view for 1 second too long, just enough for the house to feel like it had secrets again. But this time, mine. This wasn't paranoia. This was preparation. Marlene had written her story in little acts of invasion, quiet knocks, creeping powers. Now I was writing mine in protocol, in silence, in readiness. She walked through my door once. If she tried it again, she wouldn't walk out. Tran called me 2 days later. No small talk this time. Get your lawyer, meet me at the archive building downtown, conference room B. That was all she said. I met my attorney, Clara Nishimura, in the parking lot. Sharp-eyed, no nonsense, worked internal affairs before she'd gone private. She didn't ask what it was about, just pulled out a legal pad and clipped a pen to the top with a metallic snap. She always started quiet, measured, the kind of quiet that made people tell on themselves. Inside the building, the lights were dimmer than usual, security-grade fluorescents casting just enough glow to make things feel colder than they were. Tran was already waiting, a brown accordion folder in front of her. Her badge lay beside it like punctuation. I ran the archived board communications, she said. Everything flagged under admin override discussion for the last 18 months. She slid the folder toward Clara. There's one thread in there you need to see. Clara opened it. Her eyes moved fast, line by line. 2 pages in, she slowed down, froze. Ah, she muttered. There it is. She flipped the page and turned it toward me. Subject, Emergency Readiness Protocol Addendum, sent by Marlene Vexler to HOA Board, Admin. Access only, timestamp 11:47 p.m., Friday, 3 weeks before the break-in. Team, I'm initiating a selective reactivation of override access for units flagged as high-risk or historically non-compliant. This includes unit number 47, which has shown persistent communication delays, irregular maintenance patterns, and questionable occupancy conditions involving a minor. As always, discretion is advised. These actions are to be framed under emergency preparedness, not discipliner. IA review. Should concerns arise, refer to Clause 3B in the Charter revisions from 2017. M. Vexler. Below it, Clara pointed to the board replies. Greg had responded with a vague acknowledgement. Brian didn't reply at all. My house wasn't on a list. It was the list. Clara leaned back in her chair, tapping the page with one finger. She used vague language, but she knew what she was doing, framed it like safety, buried it in board jargon, and initiated unilateral protocol. That's targeted action under false pretext. And that final line, frame it, not review it, that's intent to mislead. It's enough for abuse of power and at least a misdemeanor-level unauthorized surveillance charge. Tran added, it also reinforces the system logs you pulled. We now have her motive and her paper trail. I stared at the line. Historically non-compliant. I'd never missed a payment, never skipped a meeting before Lily was born, never received anything more than passive citations until I opted out of the override grid. This wasn't about HOA policy, it was about control. I'd said no once, and she filed me away as a threat. Tran slid me a form. This is the official filing form for criminal submission. My office is ready. The DA's assistant already greenlit a pre-charge interview. All I need is your signature and go ahead. I looked at Clara. She nodded once. I signed. Tran tucked everything into a sealed folder, locked it inside a government-issued case, and stood. She'll be brought in within the week. This is a clean hit, Daniel. No mess, no room to squirm. I picked up the printout, folded it once, slid it into my own binder under a new tab labeled Targeting Authorization. One sheet of paper, one signature. That's all it ever takes to turn a home into someone's project. As we left the building, Clara spoke without looking at me. She came after you because you didn't play her game. She came after my daughter, I corrected. Clara nodded. And now she's playing mine. I got into my truck, the binder riding shotgun like a silent passenger. The folder didn't feel heavy anymore. It felt like closure. It came folded in half. No envelope, just dropped on my doorstep like a flyer. Thick white cardstock, printed in bold Times New Roman, like formatting made threats more official. Cease and desist. Accusations, defamation, harassment, entrapment. The letter was signed by Marlene Vexler, not a lawyer, not a firm, just her name, underlined twice like she thought that made it binding. I didn't even bring it inside. Scanned it on the porch, emailed it to Tran. Subject, thought you'd enjoy this. Attachment, Vexler cease thud.pdf. She replied 10 minutes later. Let her explain this in court. P.S. Save the original for evidence. It's funny. I folded the letter once more and slid it into my binder, right between the override log and the email where she called my daughter's home non-compliant. The paper crinkled as I pressed it flat, thin skin trying to hold power it didn't have anymore. Marlene hadn't been seen much since the board meeting, a few vague updates from Greg, some noise about temporary reassignment, but she hadn't made a public statement. No apology, no defense. Just this letter. I guess that was her version of damage control. Clara laughed when I showed it to her. She typed this herself, she asked, flipping it over like a surprise was hiding on the back. No header, no representation, no clause citations, just vibes and bold text. She snapped a photo and added it to the case file. She's scared, she said, and petty, dangerous combo. I nodded. Means she knows she's cornered. Later that evening, I was sitting on the back porch with a coffee, porch light flickering, a little crooked, still unregulated, when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. Local. Text read, Hey, just wanted to say, thanks for what you're doing. Didn't know how bad it had gotten. Unit 12. 15 minutes later, another one. We've had our own problems with her. Never had the guts to say anything. Appreciate you standing up. Lot 23. By midnight, I'd received 6 messages, all from neighbors I barely knew, people I'd passed on walks, waved to at the mailbox, some I didn't even recognize by name. One text just read, "You're not alone. We were just quiet." The porch light blinked once, then again. Still mine. I didn't answer most of the messages, not yet, not until it was done. But I saved every one of them, archived the numbers, tucked them into a folder named Quiet Voices. Marlene might have had the louder voice in board meetings, the citations, the binder. But I had something else now. I had momentum. Her cease and desist wasn't a threat. It was a whimper. One last reach to reclaim the illusion of power. She was hoping I'd blink, that I'd feel exposed, that I'd doubt what I knew. But she never understood the difference between stubborn and prepared. I didn't fight because I wanted revenge. I fought because she mistook silence for permission. And now, as I sat under the broken porch bulb she hated so much, binder beside me, coffee cooling, messages coming in like whispered applause, I realized something. She hadn't lost yet, but she'd already been abandoned. The folding chairs weren't enough. Residents stood shoulder to shoulder, lined up against the back wall of the HOA clubhouse. Some held coffee cups, a few had phones raised. There was even a small news crew stationed discreetly by the door, pretending not to record. The kind of turnout Windmere Hills hadn't seen since the community pool flooded in 2014. Greg cleared his throat at the podium, voice unsteady. "We'll begin tonight's special meeting with a brief presentation from Mr. Rourke." I stood and walked to the front, USB in hand. Tran waited behind me by the wall, plain clothes, silent, unreadable. I plugged in the drive. The screen flickered once, then bloomed to life with the title slide, Windmere Hills Security Audit, Oversight, Access A, and Accountability. Polite silence. Not for me, just social conditioning, but eyes were locked in. I started. "This isn't a personal vendetta," I said. "It's not about noise complaints or landscaping fines. This is about access, abuse of it, and the choice to look away." Slide 2. August 9th. Unauthorized entry log from Master Override Panel. Slide 3. Snapshot. Marlene Vexler's IP logging into admin at 2:03 a.m. Slide 4. Interior camera still. Lily asleep. Hallway door creaks open. The room shifted. Audible discomfort, a few gasps. I didn't dramatize it, didn't pace or plead. I let the images do it for me. The audit trail, the override history, the email headers, one by one. When I reached the email, the one where she labeled my address high risk, the term she used to justify surveillance on a home with a child, there was no more polite silence. There was quiet outrage. Marlene didn't stand. She stayed 2 rows back, arms crossed, jaw clenched. She looked smaller than usual. I turned to Brian, who'd stayed in the shadows near the snack table until now. He walked up slowly, took the mic, voice flat. "I was told it was temporary, emergency only," he said. "She said it'd expire after 1 week." He held up the binder I gave him last night, opened it, pointed to the date, 2 months after she said she'd stop. She never disabled it, and I didn't stop her. He stepped back. Tran moved to the front. She didn't need a badge to project authority. She held up a sealed manila folder. "I've submitted formal evidence to the county prosecutor's office. The investigation is active. Let me be clear, there are legal implications to what you've seen." She nodded toward me. "But Daniel's the one who paid the price for our delay." I looked out at them all. Faces I used to nod to while jogging, folks who asked about my truck, waved at Lily from their porches. "You think this is about one unlocked door," I said. A pause. "It's not. It's about who thought they could walk through it." I clicked to the final slide, just a single line. "This isn't your neighborhood, it's ours." That's when the shift happened. No shouting, no applause. Just that murmur. A low, collective intake of breath when people realize they've been complicit by silence. A tension collapsing under the weight of proof. Greg finally stood. "In light of tonight's evidence," he said, voice clearer now, "I motion for the immediate removal of Marlene Vexler from her position on the HOA board, effective immediately." He didn't even ask for discussion, just looked around the room. Hands rose, one by one, all but hers. She didn't move, not once, just stared at the floor as the vote passed. Unanimous. Tran nodded to me. The folder remained sealed. I unplugged the USB, tucked it into my jacket, and walked past her. For a split second, I thought she might say something, but she didn't. There was nothing left to say. 2 weeks after the meeting, the bylaws were rewritten. Line by line, the HOA charter underwent quiet surgery. Gone were the clauses allowing emergency digital overrides, manual keys only, logged entries, no exceptions. The phrase, community-wide access authority, was stripped out like dead roots from good soil. Greg sent a polite notice, attached minutes, tried to frame it as proactive modernization. No one corrected him. No one needed to. They offered me reauthorization, wanted me to help advise security going forward, said my background would be valuable. I smiled, thanked them, and said no. They didn't press. Instead, I stayed home, the way you do when the space finally feels yours again. Lily and I rebuilt the garden box out back, reinforced the trellis, ran new wire for the tomatoes. She wanted strawberries this time, said they felt like summer in a bit. And I didn't argue. Neighbors dropped by in slow waves. Some brought tools. Others just stood there, awkward, murmuring appreciation. One woman I barely knew left a folded note in our mailbox. You reminded us not to get used to silence. Thank you. I didn't reply. The porch light did that job now. We rewired it last, disconnected it from the HOA master grid. No more flickers from hidden triggers. No more diagnostics syncing from someone else's laptop. Now it ran on a simple thumb switch, right by the door Lily used to avoid at night. She reads under it sometimes, books, comics, a few stories she writes herself. The light glows soft amber, warm on her shoulders, like the house saying, "You're safe." Tran visited one final time. No badge, no printouts, just her and a thermos. "Closure check-in," she said, setting it on the steps. We sat there while Lily watered the mint patch, careful with her boots. Tran tapped the porch post. "You know, she's not the first one I've seen fall like that." "Marlene?" Tran nodded. "People build towers from rules. Forget they're just people standing on boxes." "And sometimes those boxes are stolen," I said. She smiled. "Sometimes. But sometimes someone walks up and kicks them out from underneath." She left soon after. No goodbyes, just a small salute at the gate. Lily curled up next to me that night, head resting on my arm, the porch light humming beside us. She whispered, "Will they ever try again?" I looked out at the dark, quiet neighborhood. Maybe. But this time, they'll knock. And they'll wait. She grinned and went back to her book. I leaned back, thumbed the lock beside me, and listened to it click shut. Biometric, unlinked, untouchable, just 2 prints registered, mine and Lily's. And that was enough. Justice isn't always loud. Sometimes it's the silence that stays when the wrong people leave. Have you ever dealt with a power-hungry HOA or nosy neighbor who thought your house was theirs? Drop your story in the comments. We'd love to hear where you're watching from. And if you enjoyed this journey, hit subscribe for more true justice stories that remind us your home is yours.